Right now on Upfront.
FBI probe.
The FBI has been reaching out.
Agents interviewing or attempting to interview election officials in Milwaukee about the 2020 election.
Whatever they're searching for, the investigation should be allowed to continue.
The questions, the end goal, as the FBI has yet to comment publicly. This Sunday, Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson on the latest, and Wisconsin Elections Commissioner Don Millis on what the state is watching and the new conversations he's just had.
Grand opening.
This center may be named for the Obamas, but it is built for you.
The Obama Presidential Center now open on Chicago's South Side. A Milwaukee artist is leaving her mark.
What was it like to get that call?
We'll take you inside, plus one-on-one with a local artist contributing.
And on the campaign trail.
I've spent a lot of time in Wisconsin and will continue to be here.
The intensifying stops ahead of the primary in general, all playing out right here in Wisconsin.
This is Upfront with Jaron Jordan and political director Matt Smith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. An intensifying Democratic primary race for governor this weekend, with still attention here in Wisconsin on the 2020 presidential election. The FBI in recent weeks interviewing or attempting to interview election officials, election workers, even Milwaukee police officers about Milwaukee's nearly 180,000 absentee ballots and the processing of those ballots at Milwaukee's central count location.
The FBI has declined to comment publicly. The agency has, though, recently launched investigations in other battleground states that President Trump lost in 2020. Now, both the city and Milwaukee County have moved to hire outside counsel. The absentee ballots have not yet been destroyed, raising even more alarm bells for some local officials.
With that, let's bring in Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson, who joins us now. Mayor, good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Nice to see you as well.
Let's just start right there. In terms of what the FBI is doing or talking to or attempting to talk to, what is the latest from your perspective inside City Hall?
There's nothing new other than what's been reported so far. But let me just say this, right? The president and the FBI are looking to do this in locations, in places where the president lost the election, right? I don't know if he thought he was going to run the entire table like he's George Washington or something. That's just not the case. That's just not the case. And Donald Trump is the president of the United States today. He legitimately won the election in 2024. To my dismay, but he won. He also won the election for president in 2016, and congratulations to him. He has this awesome, responsibility as president. For whatever reason, he can't accept the fact that he lost one election in 2020.
We know several MPD officers sat for interviews with agents. Has anyone else inside City Hall, a current or former employee, actually talked with the FBI?
My understanding is no.
Are they refusing to?
I don't know the answer to that, but my understanding is no, they haven't. Perhaps that's a question for the city attorney. I know that there's been outside counsel that has been engaged on this as well. But my understanding as of this moment is no.
Would you encourage them to talk if there is nothing to hide?
Look, there is nothing, there's nothing that's going on. Right? This is a vanity project. I don't want to give any additional light to these efforts to relitigate an election that was decided. Ultimately, we've got a president who, for whatever reason, just refuses to abide by the will of the voters unless he wins. Unless he wins. I mean, he's not challenging election results in states or cities where he won. He's only challenging those results in places that he did not win. And there's an additional layer to this, too, because I think, unfortunately, Donald Trump, the president of the United States, is what he is, right? But I do have another issue with other people that sign on to some of this nonsense that undermines faith in elections, right? We're celebrating the 250th anniversary of our country, American democracy. And it's a shame to me that we've got people at the highest levels of our federal government that are trying to undermine those elections and diminish the work that people in our elections across this city and across this country do every single election in order to keep this thing going. So whether that's Donald Trump or whether it's folks like Tom Tiffany, like that's a problem to me. I don't like that. That's why I encouraged the representative to, if you have an issue, come to City Hall. Let's have a conversation. Like I'll have you to meet with our elections folks yourself. Don't sign up for this mess that the president is dragging this country through. And I say that name with intention because, look, if he were to be elected governor, it's my intention to work with Tom Tiffany, right, in order to secure the necessary resources and supports needed to move Milwaukee forward. That's my intention. But I will have no room for people that undermine elections in Milwaukee or Wisconsin or this country.
Has he reached out to you?
He has not. He's not.
Let's talk about Tom Tiffany for a second.
Yeah, we asked Congressman Tiffany about this recently, who obviously is running for governor. I want to play some of his remarks. Take a listen here.
The FBI, Congressman, has been interviewing a few election officials here in Milwaukee County and the state about 2020. Do you support that?
Whatever they're searching for, the investigation should be allowed to continue, and let's find out what happened there. If there's improprieties that happened, then there should be charges filed. If not, then you let the investigation cease.
So what is wrong with the FBI double-checking everything here?
This has been fought over. It's been investigated for the past 5 years. There is nothing there.
At the same time, is this serious that the FBI is actually, whatever you want to call whatever they're doing at this moment? Yeah. Is it serious?
Is what the FBI is doing serious? Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's federal law enforcement. The FBI is still the FBI. You know, it's a reputable federal law enforcement agency. So yes, by the credibility of that law enforcement agency, it is serious.
But another wrinkle in this is the ballots from 2020. The absentee ballots have not yet been destroyed, and I know that's caused some concerns for some local officials, for some state officials. The county's corporation counsel has said, listen, there's this ongoing lawsuit, so we have to retain them. Would you have liked to see a stronger effort to destroy those ballots before today, before now, as we sit here?
Well, I mean, I don't know all the details around, the why the ballots are there. I know there's the lawsuit, of course, after an election, those routinely are destroyed. I want the privacy of voters to be protected in Milwaukee. So whatever extent that we're able to do in order to make that happen, I think we should do. Understanding that there is a lawsuit and that prevented those ballots from being destroyed. But if there was or is an opportunity to destroy that to secure the sanctity of the vote for people in Milwaukee, so that they know that their vote is private and their own, and the federal government can't figure out who folks voted for, I think we should do that.
Talking about state politics, before you leave, Democrats are just coming off their state convention. This past week, we have a governor's race with 7 candidates in the field, as you are aware. You endorsed David Crowley quickly after he entered the race. Was that the right decision as you sit here now, just a couple weeks from the August primary?
Yeah, it was absolutely the right decision. I think it's important for us to be united after a primary election. That's generally what happens. I think the same thing will happen after this primary. And my hope remains to be that David Crowley, our county executive here in Milwaukee, is the nominee for governor in the state of Wisconsin.
We are hosting a debate at the end of July. What do you need to hear from the candidates on that debate stage?
I want to hear what they're going to do for Milwaukee. And I want to hear what they're going to do for Milwaukee, not just because I'm the mayor of this incredible city, but I happen to be the leader of the most culturally diverse, economically important community in the state of Wisconsin, the population center of the state of Wisconsin. And when Milwaukee does well, and I want for people across the state to really understand this, when Milwaukee does well, then the rest of the state of Wisconsin also does well. I think it's important to have a conversation, continued conversation on shared revenue, not just for Milwaukee, but for communities all around the state. Whether we're trying to fix roads in the city of Milwaukee or communities elsewhere in the state are trying to keep their schools operational, there's a problem with the way that Wisconsin funds local governments. And that's something that we need to fix desperately here in the state. There's so many other things to talk about as well.
Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson, we appreciate your time. Like always, thank you.
Thank you, Johnson.
Don Millis, the Republican, is the incoming chair of the Bipartisan Wisconsin Elections Commission, and he joins us now. Don, thanks for being here.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, so let's pick up where Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson just left off. From a state perspective, what do you know is happening in regards to the FBI and the 2020 election right now?
So as far as I can tell, from everything I've heard from people I've talked to, you've got a series of career FBI agents in conducting questions. It sounds like they've been very professional. The only accounts of the conversations I've heard are requests to get background as to how the process works in Wisconsin. And they've certainly offered up various conspiracy theories that certain grifters have put out there. And they've asked for information as to, can they be true? And I think the information that has been provided to them is that no, that there's no evidence that there was any conspiracy or any or that the counting of the ballots in 2020 was wrong or done improperly. And so that's all I know. I don't know about any investigation. Most of what I've heard is that the interviews have been to prepare a report for higher ups in Washington.
Don, as for the ballots themselves, the mayor just told us right now in this moment still, he essentially wants them destroyed if possible. Let's back up for a second, I guess. Are you surprised that that has not happened?
I guess I'm a little frustrated. I did have a very constructive conversation with George Christensen, the Milwaukee County clerk. I probably was a little bit harsh on him when I had comments in the past. But the point is that we still need to have these ballots destroyed. There are, as I learned yesterday, 265,000 absentee ballots from which you could determine how those 265,000 people voted, not just for president, but for anything else, any other office in 2020. And those ballots should be destroyed. No one's entitled to see those. Our Constitution was built on the idea of a secret ballot, and I'm just frustrated that that hasn't happened. I just wish that the decision makers who are in charge of this would see that and move more quickly.
In terms of your conversation with George, is there a path to destroying them? Have you been reassured of that?
I think that, from what I can tell, I think they're doing is the most they can. I think that it may be advisable for the Attorney General to intervene. There certainly is a statewide interest in keeping these ballots, these voters' preferences secret. And so I think that may help speed it up. But I think that he's been frustrated with the slow pace of the litigation. In
terms of a timeline on that, I mean, do you have a best case scenario as we sit there today on when this could happen?
The best case scenario would be tomorrow, but I just don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to probably be weeks or months before that happens.
Even in the midst of the FBI looking to question people, you would be fine if they were destroyed tomorrow? Well,
I think the law permits them to be destroyed. No one has a right to see them. And so if there is a quote unquote litigation hold on those are documents that should not be subject to a litigation hold. And it would seem to me incumbent upon the court to see it that way and give permission for Mr. Christensen to do what he's authorized and required to do.
Do you know if you yourself or other commissioners or the Elections Commission has talked with the Attorney General's office about this yet?
I think there have been discussions between staff and such like that. I don't know if there's been a definitive response from the Attorney General.
Have you been satisfied with, I guess that there is no response yet, but have you been satisfied with how the AG's office is handling this?
I'd be satisfied if he chose to intervene to take the steps that need to be taken.
An official, Don, with the commission did sit down for an interview. Do you know the nature of what that interview, that conversation with those officials entailed?
There was a leak to the press about the nature of those conversations. So all I'll say is that what was said in the press was that there were professional questioning about various conspiracy theories, and the election official gave evidence debunking those. And so I do know more about that conversation, but that was information that we were given in confidence. So what was in the Journal Sentinel article concerning that was accurate.
Don Millis, the next incoming chair of the Wisconsin Elections Commission. Don, like always, hey, we appreciate your time.
Good enough. Thanks a lot. Have a good weekend.
Coming up, the Obama Presidential Center is open inside Friday's grand opening, and the Milwaukee artist whose work is appearing inside. We'll talk with her next.